I want you to hit me as hard as you can.
Kneel before Zod!
The controversy surrounding Superman 2 is the stuff of legend. One of the biggest and most respected directors being replaced partway through production? Scandalous. Yet even with these circumstances, the film still managed to be one of the better superhero films for decades.
Would you care to step outside?
Today, we're getting into it all in DC Revisited, Superman 2. Fans of Superman have always had an obsession with this film, and with good reason. What other films do you know where the director was replaced in lieu of having a lighter tone?
Oh, something is definitely bleeding.
Okay, maybe it's not so uncommon, but this was the first instance of fans willing a new cut of a priorly completed film into existence. But in order to discuss these different versions, we must first go back to the production of the first film. The original plan was to film Superman and its sequel back-to-back. Given the extensive delays due to the technical skill required, the decision was made to stop filming the sequel and just focus on completing the first film. This proved to be a good decision, with Superman making a mint at the box office and leaving audiences wanting more. So you would think that the path of least resistance would be to have everyone return to finish the remaining 25% of the sequel. Sounds logical. Only one problem. The Salkinds and Pierre Spengler did not get along with original director Richard Donner. In fact, it had gotten so bad that they hired Richard Lester as an intermediary between the producers and Donner during the first film, as they were not on speaking terms. Thanks for watching DC Films Revisited. If you enjoy our shows, please subscribe to our channel right now, like this video, and click on the bell so you can be notified each time a new video comes up. Now, back to the show. According to Variety, Pierre Spengler was actually looking forward to working with Donner on the sequel. When Donner got word of this, he said, "If he's on it, I'm not." The main issue came from Donner's perceived lack of creative control. He wanted full control to make the movie that he wanted, but the producers still wanted a say, given that it was their money invested in the project. Never coming to an agreement, Richard Lester was chosen as Donner's replacement, given his prior involvement with the project. Given Christopher Reeve and Margot Kidder's close relationship with Richard Donner, neither seemed happy about the switch in directors. Adding to the frustration was the filming schedule, which changed when the plan to make both films back-to-back was abandoned, causing issues with Reeve's new film, Somewhere in Time. To compensate him, producers gave Reeve a better back-end deal as well as more creative control. While Reeve had been mostly diplomatic regarding the replacement over the years, Kidder, on the other hand, has not, often lambasting Lester for his creative decisions. The fallout from Donner's firing was immediate, with several key creative members refusing to return. Gene Hackman, having developed a close friendship with Donner, declined to return for any of the reshoots. Because of this, they had to work with the prior footage, as well as use a voice and body double. It's quite obvious in spots.
Each one totally dedicated to corruption, violence, and evil.
Creative consultant Tom Mankiewicz, who, if you watched our last video, you'll know was the main writer on the original film, also declined to come back out of loyalty to Donner. But it wasn't just because of Donner that certain creative elements failed to return. Cinematographer Jeffrey Unsworth had passed away just before release. Set designer John Barry, who collapsed on the Empire Strikes Back set, died from meningitis. So the look of Superman was set to drastically change. The main issue that the Salkinds had with replacing Donner is that Donner had already filmed 75% of the movie. If they were to reuse all of that footage, they would need to give him credit on the film based on Directors Guild rules. In order for Richard Lester to receive proper credit, he needed to have filmed 40% of what ended up on screen. So they instead had Lester go back and film scenes again, changing them ever so slightly. It makes for some really arbitrary changes, most of them lesser than what was originally shot. But the biggest problem with Lester's vision for the film is that it directly conflicted with Donner's, And given that a majority of the footage used would still be from Donner, it caused some strange inconsistencies. Lester had said that there was a kind of David Leanish attempt in several sequences, and enormous scale. There was a type of epic quality, which isn't in my nature. So my work really didn't embrace that. That's not me. So all those dynamic shots from the first film that were meant to add scale, replaced with static shots that Lester felt more resembled a comic book panel. Even scenes that Donner originally shot were color timed in such a way that it took away from the original work that Barry and Unsworth did. Not to mention all of the continuity issues between Reeve and Kidder in this scene alone. Thankfully, most of the cast from the first film returned to their roles here. The main group we need to discuss is the Kryptonian terrorists. As introduced by Jor-El, we have Non,
this mindless aberration, whose only means of expression are wanton violence and destruction.
Ursa,
Whose perversions and unreasoning hatred of all mankind have threatened even the children of the planet Krypton.
and General Zod.
Chief architect of this intended revolution and author of this insidious plot to establish a new order amongst us, with himself as absolute ruler.
These are our big villains of the piece and provide us with some of the best moments of the entire film. Not only are they equal matches to Superman, but there are 3 of them. Really ups the stakes from the first one. The basic story between the 2 versions is essentially the same. Clark still wants to leave his life of Superman behind him to be with Lois, and Zod, Non, and Ursa are still terrorizing Earth. It's just the little details and order of events that are different. But those little moments really add up for an entirely different tone. We'll refer to Richard Lester's version as the theatrical cut and the Richard Donner version as the Donner cut. First, the beginning of the film is entirely different. Superman stops a group of terrorists in France, saves the day, and sends the bomb out through the top of the Eiffel Tower and out into space. This bomb explodes and releases Zod, Non, and Ursa out of their imprisoned state in the Phantom Zone. In Donner's version, we simply get a replay of the end of Superman 1, with Supes capturing the rocket and sending it out into space. This time, however, we follow it and see that when it explodes, it releases the imprisoned Kryptonians. While the connection to the first film is nice, it does feel a little, why am I watching this? So not all of the Donner content is preferred, but sometimes the differences were absolutely paramount. You may have noticed that Marlon Brando doesn't appear in the theatrical version of Superman 2. This is due to his contract dispute with Warner Brothers that resulted in a lawsuit. Due to this, no footage of him was allowed to be used. That means the beginning portion with the trial on Krypton had to be entirely reshot without Brando. Not only that, but young Kal-El being sent away also needed to be reshot with just Lara-El. Lara replaces Jor-El in any of the instances where he was intended to show up. It's very confusing since, to this point, Jor-El is the main connection that Clark has with Krypton. Thankfully, by the time the Donner cut was released, Brando had long since settled his dispute, so Donner was able to use his footage as originally intended. This meant that the opening was near identical to the opening of the original film, and the instances of Clark interacting with the Fortress of Solitude are now back to Brando instead of Susanna York. It really helps bridge the 2 films in a natural way. Another major change is the scene at Niagara Falls. The oddest aspect of this is that it appears to be entirely ADR'd.
I can give you a hand if you have trouble lifting.
Oh, no, of course not.
Honey, thanks, I'll walk.
Certainly, dear.
It makes the moment feel very artificial. While the interactions between Clark and Lois are much more natural in the Donner cut, the biggest issue is how Lois finds out Clark is Superman. She shoots at him with a gun. Sure, it's revealed shortly after that it was just a blank, but regardless, it makes Lois look like a crazy person. But this is the same woman who threw herself out the window to prove that Clark is Superman, and failing to do so. So I suppose that anything is possible. One aspect that really doesn't work in either version is how quickly Clark goes from powerless to realizing he needs his power again to defeat Zod. The diner scene where he gets beaten up by a trucker named Rocky is our only time being able to see him in this weakened state, because then he's off to get his powers back to try and defeat the Kryptonians. It feels very short-sighted. Otherwise, it's mostly the order of events that are changed between the two versions. The ending is where we see a pretty big departure yet again. In the original theatrical version, Superman defeats the Kryptonians and heads back to Metropolis with Lois, who's upset that she can't cope with Clark's true identity and her love for him. This is where Superman introduces the strangest power yet, outside of his cellophane cape. The ability to wipe someone's memory with simply a kiss. Now, before people get too upset, this is actually a power that Superman has in the comics. It's established in Action Comics 306, so this isn't something completely out of left field. However, the power was retconned in the 80s, so it clearly didn't have many fans. Meanwhile, in the Donner version, we have Clark making the rough decision to undo his relationship with Lois, while simultaneously undoing all the damage that Zod and his cronies caused on Earth. It effectively means that none of the film actually happened, but it also kept Zod and the others alive with the potential to be used in the future. Neither ending is fully satisfying, and there will always be fans on either side of the aisle. But given the time travel, things get a little bit confusing with Clark returning to the diner in the end. This trucker has no idea who Clark is. Neither do these people. So it really just looks like Clark is a big bully for no reason. At least the theatrical version had some context. As production wrapped, no mention was made of the controversy with Donner. Specials were produced at the time that made it seem as though it was just a regular Hollywood production, which it was clearly anything but. Due to Directors Guild rules, Donner had still contributed to 60% of the film, and therefore needed to be listed as a co-director. Lester approached Donner about being listed as a co-director on the film, to which Donner reportedly said, "I don't share credit." Given that the theatrical version was not his intended vision, Donner had no issue giving up credit, so Richard Lester is solely credited in the poster and in the movie. After viewing an early cut of the film, composer John Williams felt he could no longer contribute to the project after the massive change in direction. Because of this, Williams was replaced by Ken Thorne, who had won an Oscar for the film. A funny thing happened on the way to the forum. Despite this accolade, the score really suffered due to the lack of Williams at the helm. Even the parts of Williams' score that Thorne recreated packed much less oomph. Likely because they were recorded with a studio orchestra rather than the London Symphony Orchestra, like in the first film. Thankfully, Williams' score was reused for the Donner cut. Always wanting to optimize box office receipts, producers looked to release the film at different times of the year, depending on the territory's most popular times for moviegoing. That meant that the film released in Australia on December 4th, 1980, and then in the UK on Easter of 1981. By the time the film actually released in the United States on June 19th, it was well behind the rest of the world. Despite this, Superman 2 was a massive success, breaking records with a first-day gross of $4.3 million. Audiences and critics took to it for how much it upped the stakes from the first film. We're no longer just getting Superman stopping crimes and disasters. We finally get to see him battle with people with similar powers. It truly felt like a comic book coming to life, and audiences responded with a final tally of $190 million at the box office. Having seen the success that the TV version of the original brought them, the Salkinds decided to repeat the process and release a version that featured more than 24 minutes of new footage. Like the first film, none of this footage adds to the overall story and essentially just extends scenes. Adding to the confusion, there are many different TV versions depending on the country of origin. Some countries even omitted most of the violence at the White House, while including these extra flourishes, which amounts to dozens of varied versions of the television release. Still, the many different TV versions are highly sought after due to these inclusions and exclusions. Speaking of different versions, the story behind Donner being removed from the film was the stuff of legends in movie and comic book circles. The legendary Donner Cut took on a mythical status, with fans even releasing Superman 2 Restored International Cut, which took scenes from the TV version and international versions of the film to get it as close to Donner's original vision as possible. This was met with legal action from Warner Brothers, so the idea of a legitimate cut seeing the light of day grew smaller by the second. Until a certain interview with Margot Kidder and a new Superman film being in production. Kidder had stated in an interview that there was a version of Superman 2 that Donner shot that was much better than what was released in theaters. While fans had been hoping to see this for years, it was Margot's inference that the film was simply waiting in a Warner Brothers vault, waiting to be found, that sent fans into a frenzy. One of such fans just happened to be creating a new vision of Superman, Bryan Singer. Singer had such a love for the Reeve Superman films that he wanted his version to be a continuation of that story, ignoring the events of 3 and 4. Due to this, Singer wanted to use elements from the original films that hadn't been used. And so the vault was accessed, revealing a treasure trove of footage. In fact, all of the film that Donner shot was in such good shape that some of the footage of Brando was used in Singer's Superman Returns. Seeing how much excitement had drummed up at the idea of returning to Donner's Superman world via Singer's vision, Warner Brothers decided it was time to compile the old footage and give the fans what they wanted. With Singer producing, Donner was brought back along with Mankiewicz to complete his edit of the film. The Donner Cut was no longer myth. While we've gone over the many differences between the two versions, Donner has stated that he would have included a different ending if he had been able to film it back in the day. But he maintains that the film is as close to his original vision as you can get. Warner Brothers released the Donner Cut on DVD and Blu-ray in 2006, alongside the release of Superman Returns. In the years since, like his contemporaries, Terence Stamp appeared in the TV show Smallville as the voice of Jor-El. Sarah Douglas showed up more recently on the show Supergirl as a Kryptonian named Jinda Kol-Raz, and while he hasn't appeared on any Superman-related content since, Jack O'Halloran appeared on the podcast How Did This Get Made? And told many stories about his time on the set of Superman, including having to put Christopher Reeve in his place. It's worth a listen if you're interested in more behind-the-scenes gossip. Despite the production of Superman 2 having a layer of controversy, the successful results cannot be denied. Whether you prefer the original theatrical version or the Donner Cut, the film has something for everybody. But while the red cape and blue spandex was setting the box office on fire, another DC adaptation was waiting in the wings. Or rather, the swamp. Join us next time, same movie time, same movie channel. Thank you for watching our show. If you like what you see, please subscribe to our JoBlo Videos channel, tell your friends who like this sort of content, and turn on the bell to receive notifications for all of our latest videos. We're an independent company, and we appreciate all of your support.